I think a couple days ago, where you talked about this pastor was getting ready to do a baptism, and then the guy starts saying some crazy stuff, right, in the baptismal font, and he goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! Let's slow down here," because and so I'm going to tell on myself. I had a guy, that young guy that I've been working with until 12-step recovery, whatever. He comes to me after a meeting, and we'd talked for probably about 4 or 5 months, but there was no formal catechesis. And he just says, well, what happens that I believe? And then I said what Peter said. Well, you know, the same thing in Acts. Well, you confess from out, we'll baptize you and everything else. He's like, can we do that now? We went down to a swimming pool and I did a baptism, right? Now, that was okay in my world, right? Now, uh, again, that was done with all sincerity and love and everything else. But uh, there is some wisdom, I think, Paul, and I've been making the case. And so Protestants, you would say that like the loss of the vocational and the mainline and I, I felt like in Methodist, my big Methodist church, Paul, but I think the same thing would have happened for you, was that there was this understanding that this is kind of a hard, long process, and you kind of work with people. They come to, like, even a new person, come to a membership class for a little bit, hang out. This is what we're going to do and believe. You cool with that? Like, I think it doesn't have to be 2 or 3 years or anything like that, but there's something about um, making sure that someone really knows what they're getting into, if that makes sense, right? Giving them some time. And I don't think they're going to go to hell just because they weren't baptized before they died. So I don't think there needs to be this rush. That's my opinion. But I know some people maybe not disagree with that. But I think we're losing, and I think that's what you're pointing at, Paul, and I think that's what Sam was. I think there's some wisdom in some depth uh, in bringing people into the church. I don't know.
We just had Sunday after church, we had a special council meeting because we've got people who've been at church a while and we need to make them members. And so we're going to have 3 adult baptisms, and which for the Christian Reformed Church is a big deal, because the Christian Reformed Church, like many traditional churches, has sort of lived on, having children and making them. So we've got 3 adult baptisms and then 1 person coming in from another church. So that's a profession of faith. And, all of them, I had another couple come in, church shoppers on Sunday, and this is their second time through. So, when church shoppers come through a second time, oh, we're still on the list. And I talked to them and I said, I have no problem with someone coming and participating for a year before they actually become official members, because I want you to stick. I want you to take a good look. I want you to be at home, and to sort of ring in the emergent church conversation. I mean, that was a big element of the emergent church thing, where you belong before you believe. And so, and again, you look at Orthodoxy and long periods of catechesis. I mean, being in a church for a year or 2 before actually becoming members of the church, that's functionally catechesis. And so, it's a very metagelical moment where you've got a former Methodist here, pushing back on some of my prodding of the Methodism, but you're Orthodox now. And, so I think this is actually how the body of Christ has always worked. We have many of the letters of Paul, but was James and that epistle that Luther called of straw, was he a Judaizer? We have Augustine from the Catholic Church, but the Donatists were sort of the rigorous among them in the wake of the persecutions and the defections of priests. And so innovation and revival comes into the church, and it's a continual churn whereby the gifts that God has distributed throughout his church can come to bless more and more portions of the church. And that's, part of the reason why I celebrate this this ortho moment. You know, it looks big from our point of view, might be small from other points of view, but I think God continues to revive his church and strengthen his church and make his church, equip his church to reach each generation and different cultures and nations. So I think it's all the work of the church.
You're muted.
Lance, you're muted. Yeah.
I always think it's interesting that, particularly if you're new, like if you grew up in a secular home or whatever, and there are a lot of, which is shocking to me, there are a lot of people that really like had no idea what Christian people thought or talked about or whatever, are new to that or whatever. So if you're oh gosh, I lost what I was going to say when I got dropped off there. Anyway. What I was going to say, in 12-step groups, so the 12 steps says having had a spiritual awakening is the result of these steps. What they realize is you have to go through you're going to go through this process, and really what the process is a repentance process, right? You're going to go through this process, and then ultimately out of that, what's going to happen is you're going to then have you're gonna have an understanding and awareness, and your belief is built like after that. And so one of the things about and it's okay to get the cart before the horse, but sometimes if we rush too quickly, how can you believe or have faith before you actually start practicing these things and start living the life? Because the faith kind of gets born out of the life that you're living, and then it's showing up and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a interesting thing. It looks like someone wants to criticize me, and I don't want to run away from criticism. Prester John said, I would love to know if PVK saw the PBS News report, but of course Lance didn't highlight or ask the comment to him. Go figure.
Well, the Donk posted this. It was on the Dispatch, actually. I don't know. PBS had a piece. I mean, what's interesting is that on one hand, you know, there's clearly something going on in terms of orthodoxy right now. There's no question about that. But then again, the Peugeot question of where do you stand? So if you stand in the corner and you see all of this, you know, new converts and people from other traditions having their spiritual life, you know, quickened in orthodoxy, it's like, wow, this is a big deal. But maybe if you look at the entire, and you know, this is no secret. It was an Orthodox priest that wrote that piece in the Dispatch that John Van Donk shared, and the Orthodox on YouTube have been very open about the fact that, you know, compared to something like the Methodist Church in America, the Orthodox are tiny. There's a great video by Ready to Harvest on you know, McDonald's size reach in churches in America, and they're like Catholic, PCUSA, United Methodist Church, Southern Baptist, or not even Southern Baptist. Southern Baptist still is fairly regional. You know, they're almost there. Assemblies of God, of course, is enormous, but you know, the Orthodox Church in America is tiny and fragmented in many ways, and so, you know, there's no shame in that. It's just the way it is. So I just, you know, I don't know. I praise God for the one sheep that gets found and brought in. If that's through the Orthodox, I'll celebrate it. So,
well, and it kind of meets our moment right now. Like my nephew is an Orthodox catechumen. Our family is church shopping right now. We brought him to the Orthodox Church. We introduced him. It's meeting a need for where he was at. And it does tie into that deeper history that I was missing in my low church context. But yet I'm not joining. So it's just this interesting mix, and it will continue to grow. You know, it has legs. That movement is going to keep growing, but it will encounter some of the headwinds eventually that other churches have faced.
You know, Lance, you're highlighting other people's comments criticizing you when you won't even talk to me so I can criticize you. You know, I feel like
you're here. Let me have it. Let me have it, Alan.
You know, No. But I did want to make the point about like, yeah, we have the heaven chords and we got the green screen, the smoke machine, whatever you want to call it. But like, they've got incense and they've got chanting and they've got, murals on the walls. I've been to, a service. Guess what? Those are also designed to be the like emotional, get you like, if you go to a cult, I'm not comparing Eastern Orthodox to a cult, but like you go to any place that's there to, change your belief system, you go to Scientology, whatever, they're going to do long staring into your eye. They're not just going to use a smoke machine and heaven chords. They're going to use like long waiting. There are all sorts of techniques. So like, yeah, incense is also, you could say, no, we're doing that because in Revelation it says the prayers of the saints are like incense unto God. And yeah, but it also is serving another purpose. So, I don't think it's fair to be like, no, when they do it, it's, it's just emotional manipulation. But when we do it, it's because it's what God told us to do, it's so, it's not exactly, like, and I like it. I like sitting in an Eastern Orthodox service and looking at the murals and smelling the incense and hearing the chanting of the prayers. It's nice. You could call it hypnosis. You could call it relaxation. You could call it brainwashing. You could call it communion with God, like whatever. But they're there for a reason. And we're not just like brains floating in a vat who are like, when you make the correct argument, I will believe in Jesus. So yeah, I just wanted to like point out, like, yeah, whether it's heaven chords on a keytar, and a green screen, or it's incense in a Catholic church or murals in an Eastern Orthodox church. I mean, literally the Catholics like just stare at a piece of bread, the Eucharist, the body of Christ, which is also just a piece of bread, which is also the body of Christ. It's like, if that isn't also a technique, I don't know what is, yes, you could say it. So, yeah. So all these things are just melded together and it's hard to draw like strong lines of like, this is manipulation, but this is following the word of God.
So there's a passage of scripture that I don't see people talking about, which is kind of, to me, is very interesting. And I think it overlaps with what you're saying, Alan, about the validity of this, where in 2 Kings, there's a story where the prophet Elisha is brought in to prophesy and he doesn't have anything to say. So he says, bring a musician in. They bring a guy in with a lyre. He starts riffing. Like the guy just starts playing a couple of bars and the prophet just like lets the music kind of get to him. And then he just freestyles prophecy. And that's in the Bible. It's not a hypothetical, can God use these sort of things? It's like straight up in scripture that this is how the prophet Elisha one time communicated God's desires for his people, right? So it doesn't seem ridiculous to me at all that we would use this manipulation, for lack of a better term.
Yeah,
I would say kind of these are tools of formation, but yeah, just I think like the 12 steps were kind of like a way that people could gain some footing in a spiritual formation, and then they start to take the action, and then the mind follows and all that stuff. But you'd be surprised at how many people can't take the steps or won't take the steps because they don't already feel like they possess a belief of some sort, and so they'll block themselves from being able to seek any further. And it's like, that's putting the cart before the horse. Like, let's just kind of like do some house cleaning, clear out the garbage, clean out the temple, and maybe we'll find some books in here. I think that's kind of what the steps are like. And but I was thinking about all of this different kinds of stuff. Like, this is so interesting. I had a conversation last night with this lady Melly, and it was the most incredible and grounding conversation I think I've had in life. And so I'm sharing that with you guys because I'm hoping that everybody gets an opportunity to hear her story. It's really incredible and I think unique, but probably not historically unique. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the other night. Ann and I were cooking dinner, and she was reading to me all these different kinds of traditions, so-called Christian traditions that have cropped up throughout the last century or so. And I was thinking about how a lot of it is rooted in somebody's particular revelation, and then that gets carried and kind of like codified in a sense, and try to maybe methodize how to do this. And a lot of that, I was thinking about how when PVK talked about in the past about how, like in the West, as we move further out into the frontier, Bibles are heavy to carry. So, like when that happens, you have all sorts of innovative ideas and changes that start to take place because of people. I think it's rooted in desperation, not in actual malevolence or anything like that. It's like people are trying to grasp for a story to be inside of. And I think Christian Baxter's pronouncing that the internet has dissolved the walls of the church is just another iteration of the American pioneer spirit, that Bibles are very heavy to carry. And who knows how you want to kind of map that, whether it's like my own ideas make it hard for me to or impossible to adhere to anybody because I have a Protestant spirit and don't know it. And innovate. Yeah, it's interesting. It's because if you just like actually spend time with people before, this was a lot easier for me before I ever became Christian, by the way. So before I ever became a Christian, like I didn't really have any kind of like disgust sensitivity around what people believed other than Christians themselves as a whole. So, but as I become Christian, I become more and more leery and like mook or knightish and protective, and egotism wants to step in and kind of like try to do its job. It's interesting. And I think God, Christ, the Father, all of that, if there's one thing that I think I can really rely on, is looking at the pattern that God, the greatest storyteller ever was, is the ultimate frame breaker. And that's very comforting to me and also terrifying. So I just wanted to share that. I think you guys are doing a great job. And with that, I'll pass.
Nope.
Great stuff, Chad.
Disappeared. I was even wondering about some of Chad's, what his opinions would be on some of these ideas about manipulation, because I think even, and I mean in a positive way, I even think the 12 steps is an example of that. It's like how we arbitrarily focus on things that we wouldn't necessarily focus on. So the Protestants would do this by saying, we're going through a book of the Bible exegetically, and so we have to talk about money because Jesus is talking about money, so we're forced to do this, right? The liturgy would do that as well, where liturgically it would be like, I don't know if you guys feel sad today, but today is a fast day. So you're going to lament, you're going to do all these things because that's, even if you don't feel it, you're going to work yourself up to it. And I think of things like, I don't know, before like doing plays or even in sports, when people would work themselves up in order to do a thing that they think is valuable. Even if you don't feel that way immediately, you see the value in the thing you're about to do. So that role of the artificial, but seeing that as kind of a positive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's super normal. You know, like, yeah, have you ever, when you play sports as a kid, you don't always want to go, if you're in the locker room and you're like yawning and like, it's the championship game, but I have a test tomorrow. People don't like that, People
Right.
are putting on face paint. People are doing all these tribal rituals. I don't know if you've heard of Mark of the Warrior, but people will, on your like open skin, slap you, and then it leaves a red imprint. So it's like, I've got the red imprint, Mark of the Warrior, and that'll go away in 24 hours. But yeah, So people do that all the time, and it's like not only important but necessary. I mean, what do you think we do when we're praying? Of like, I don't know. I don't always want to get down and pray, but it's like I'm going to orient myself towards God and around His Word, and and I'm also going to top down, God, tell me what to do. Bottom up, this is what I want, God. Please tell me, please open these doors if it's your will. So yeah. I mean, I definitely think we need the top down. Like, you don't want to fast, but you want to go to Golden Corral and stuff your face because you're a little piggy, but you're going to fast today, and you're going to wear, sackcloth and put ashes on your head because, the world is filled with troubles and bad things, and you need to remember that.
And that influence can still be rejected too. There was this book that came out like 2010-ish called A Year of Living Biblically, where this guy, A.J. Jacobs, he just decides, I'm going to follow every single rule in the Bible. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting examination on cognitive dissonance as well, because he finds himself becoming more religious just because he practices.
Mm.
And then he's at a snake handling church in the South, and he feels himself emotionally getting worked up, and he almost becomes a born again Christian. But he's just like, no, I can't do it. This is just, it's too far. I can't explain this to my wife. This is not cool. So it's like, it's an interesting thing, because all of that working yourself up and all the manipulation, it doesn't mean that you don't still have a choice. You still have to say, okay, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, in my Escher, we were just talking yesterday. We were talking about people being like, well, I feel like I shouldn't feel this way, or I should feel this, like these emotions.
Yeah.
And it made me think of the Serenity Prayer, and it made me think of AA a lot, because it's like, oh, I shouldn't drink, therefore I won't. It's like, well, how good is that? Oh, I'm sure that will solve your problem. You're an alcoholic. I'm sure just explaining to yourself that drinking would ruin your marriage. Well, you won't drink then. Like, that's not how it works. But it's all the way down into like these systems within yourself, and then all the way up to systems outside yourself. And so this person, the Year of Living Biblically, of like, I'm starting to see the systems outside of myself. I'm starting to see God's hand at work, or a community at work. I mean, you don't have to start just with God. God's like so big that like I'm almost hesitant to, like, when people are like, show me God. It's like, well, I'll start with like a small, like, what about a community? Can I show you what a community is? And like, like I'll show, like suddenly you start caring. I mean, we see it all the time of like, you go to a new school, and all the people at this new school, they all wear jeans instead of slacks, or whatever. I used to go to a school with a uniform, and we all wore slacks, and now everyone wears ripped jeans. One day you go to school, and suddenly you look down and you're wearing ripped jeans. How did this happen? How could this have possibly happened? It's like, well, the community influenced you, and in the same way, like, oh, I started wearing these clothes, going to these events, going to church. How did this happen? It's like, well, you started participating in that level. So yeah, exactly. Like, it doesn't surprise me that someone starts doing the things at a small level and starts experiencing, seeing these larger things, start seeing God at a larger level.
I spent a long time outside, unchurched, between my born again experience in a Southern Baptist church in my adolescence to my would be my late 50s, I guess. I mean, there was a lot of stuff happened in between. And, when I came back to the church, the question wasn't about where did I feel I could find God in any of the churches. I found God in all the churches. I couldn't walk into a room and not say, oh, wow, this is great. They're experiencing the Lord. This is fantastic. So it was for me, finding a place to plant myself when it came down to it, it basically needed God saying, go there. I had a strong impression, go there. And that was it. it's and as far as methods go, I'd love to find out what Paul thinks my method is. Come to Jesus via Tibetan Lama. I don't know, but I think I'm actually trying to voice support for Alan's point in a roundabout way. Of course, now people may say that it could be completely invalidated by some people's theology because, of course, from the view of many people, those Tibetan lamas are demonic. So, I got saved via the devil.
I didn't even know they had lamas in Tibet, but that's great that they talk to you about Jesus.
They do. It's just like Balaam's ass, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's also, it makes me laugh of like, if we really believe this stuff is true, it's like, well, shouldn't there, that wouldn't surprise me that anything can lead you to God. Any experience could lead you to God. I always laugh of like, people be like, well, things being real, anything good. Oh, well, God did that. And it's like, yeah, that's true. And then people will be like, well, what about all the bad things? It's like, well, yeah, anything you can say is bad will point you to God in that, like, okay, there's not bad, Jordan Peterson makes this point of like, no one who's actively on fire is like, life is meaningless. There's no purpose to life. If you light someone on fire, they very rarely are like, well, I might as well not put it out. So, yeah, it's just all experiences, whether it's, in Tibet or anywhere, I'm like, okay, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that could lead you to God.
Well, it's funny. Paul mentioned the House of Wu quite a bit in his video this morning, and it was like, yeah, Ron definitely is more in the, boom, conversion experience Christianity, a very conventional, I guess you'd say Pentecostal Methodism, and I'm much more about we're coming from very different points of view, and but we intersect, and because my point of view is just wake up and orient yourself towards Jesus, and you'll find him. Wherever you're at, it doesn't. If you're a Catholic, just do it as a Catholic. If you're Presbyterian, do it as a Presbyterian. Chasing after conversion experiences, they might be functional. In a very individualistic way, that is, they might move you, they might help you orient, may help make you break through some of your psychological and emotional and historical blocks. But ultimately, it's just, I view is just the woo is Jesus is here, and you can experience it, and he will involve himself in your life if you let him. And so that's, but is there a method to it? And is there a form to it? It seems like there's 1,000 methods to it. Everyone wants to say, well, the path is narrow, to the Lord, and, wide is the path, the road to destruction. That's all true. But from a human perspective, it seems like you can practice orienting yourself toward God in a myriad of ways, as this corner testifies to, right? Oh well. I killed the conversation. Sorry, Lance. Good to see you.
No, you didn't. I was just being quiet to I talked enough. I was just trying to make sure you guys had a chance to say what you have to say. And God is everywhere present, filling all things. I also participate in 12-step recovery groups where they don't tell you who God is, and you just go on, you seek a God of your own understanding, right? And that's all we can really ever have anyway, right? I participate weekly in a group where the God of people's own understanding is wide and roomy and everything else. And I see it working. Like, I actually see people with transforms lives, right? And the biggest thing, and Chad was mentioning this, which is about formation versus what was it? Formation. What was the other word? You remember, Alan? You're smart. He was saying formation versus, was it propaganda or what was it? I can't remember what it was. And Sherry's mentioned this. Like, we're all on this journey, right? That's really what we are. Everything is a process, right? At least I would just say the experience that I've had. And here I want to still, man, I have not been in, me personally, although I'm shocked to hear people say discipleship wasn't a big part of any Protestant church or Protestant movement they were a part of. Every single one I've been a part of dealt with formation because they understood the journey's hard. Like, so the journey's hard, right? Like, life is just hard. And the Christian, like, life is hard. And then the journey is hard. And the whole thing is to try and get you, get into the community. So now you can withstand the storms of life and you have people who have your back and those sorts of things. And so I think we're all on our journey. We're where we're at. We're God seekers. I think that's really, like, I would just say, I've heard that mentioned about 12-step groups, but I think one of the things for most people that are here, I think, would you guys agree that a lot of people are seeking God, are God seekers? If you come to this little corner, whether it be Hezi and Jacob or David, right? I think to some extent, for the most part, most people are here because they're seeking God in their lives in some way, right?
Well, so for me, I find it incredibly interesting. Like, I don't know about the word seeking. I just find it interesting to have any kind of conversation about mythological stories, religious foundations. All that stuff is incredibly interesting. And I don't know how to make other people interested in it. And so one of the things that has attracted me here is other people who are interested and want to talk about the thing. Because one of my experiences is like an experience that I think back on a whole bunch is I was at this party with my theater friends. A lot of people are drinking. And this one guy is grabbing beer from the fridge. And this girl asks me an inherently philosophical question, right? Because I love talking philosophy. So she asked me a question that can only be answered philosophically. And this guy who's grabbing beer does not want to hear me talk philosophy. So when she hears, when he hears her ask me this question, he smacks his beer on the counter for 1 second and just goes, fuck, and then rushes out before he has to put up with a single second of listening to anyone talking anything philosophical. Is that there's so many instances where people are anti-interested. It's like, I need to push away from this thing. So to be in a situation with y'all fine folk who want to talk about these things that I find particularly interesting, even if you disagree with me. Like, I had a long conversation with Yon God and I was enjoying myself. Even like atheistic, whatever, if you're interested in these topics, I'd love to have a conversation with you.
A big part of the journey too can be going through stages where you realize the God of your understanding is an idol, or you could say dead, and then you go through these dark periods or these deconstructed periods where you seek and you get somehow revitalized and come back to faith. And you may do this several times in your lifetime. And having permission to do that, which I think the corner is getting there, I think it's okay. You've got it. Otherwise, what happens is everyone gets stuck some people get stuck in their adolescent conversion experience, and they're there for 50 years, and they may die that way, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine to be stuck. God can work through stuck, but a lot of people, particularly in this day and age, because we have so much data and our pluralistic experience in society and the internet and everything else, we're just flooded with the information and alternatives. And so, as we go, some people will deconstruct and get stuck in their atheism. And I'm less inclined to say that's okay, because that's kind of sad. Because you die with the expectation of nothing. Well, okay, enjoy your nothing. But I think I said it. I don't need to add to it.
I have a question. How am I the TLC's Pee Wee Herman? That has come up in the chat. David is the TLC Pee Wee Herman in a red tie. I don't even know what that's getting at.
I don't know, Prester John. I've just seen there's a lot of comments back and forth. Again, I put Young God's in here. I like it. But seems like he's going back and forth with quite a few people.
You offended somebody for something, David, and they were trolling my chat a day or two ago, and I couldn't figure out what the beef was.
Yeah.
I just said, this is not the David I know. The David I know seems quite open and nice and friendly and not racist at all. And they were on a rant, and I don't know what you did to somebody, but praise the Lord.
They said I was racist.
Something like that. Yeah, kind of weird, isn't it? And it was really weird.
Against which race? I hope it was like super specific. It was like just Armenians or
blonde like Nordic women. You like them too much. No, that's racist too, right? What is it?
What's happening right now? I don't even understand. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, I don't know what that's about. Sorry.
All right.
Bye, guys. I got to hit the road. I'm going to Sacramento, PVK. I'm going to make a pilgrimage to Living Stones, whether you're there or not. And I kiss the stucco or something, make oblations, and then watch the road sawed off my car. See you guys. Have a good day.
See you, Mark. All right. Wait a minute. Oh, Paul's there. He's going to see him. Hezi might be trying to find his way in. Yeah, and I do want to come back. So Paul, it started on the emerging conversation. Sam made the point that he felt like that moment, the kind of conversion moment, kind of focus of some aspects might be going away. Paul did the homeroom here today. What I do want to say is, and I feel like you always have to say this, but it like goes without saying, it's not as if that people who've had those moments, that's a bad thing. It's also not as if people haven't had those moments and then gone on into deeply practiced their Christianity and had transformed lives and so on and so forth. I do think what we're trying to look at, though, in terms of looking at all these deconstruction stories, looking at the numbers of people that have been leaving the church for a while now, we look at the response that people have had to try, because really, what's the response? What was the emergent, so we bring back to this conversation. Why was there an emergent church? Well, they were trying to respond to the fact that people, like the nuns, Nathan Jacobs, that people are leaving in droves. And then we have this modernity thing going on and everything we're experiencing, society, and we've got all these things, is kind of putting a fine point on where are we at, and are we moving into something that's going to require something else than that response. Here's Hezi. Good morning to Hezi.
Hello.
Or good evening to Hezi.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I hope all you guys are doing well. Bravo, David, on your performance last week. Whole crew. Very nice, very nice. You said something, and also Lance said something that made me think of a conversation I had this morning. Bear with me for 2 minutes as I lay it out. I've mentioned this here and there, that I moved to this new neighborhood, and we're dealing with different elements of community building. Definitely also, or specifically when dealing with different different people from different denominations is the wrong word, but different different views, so to speak, of how they want to express their religiosity in Judaism. And I saw specifically this is focused on the role of women, different waves of feminism that are that need to be considered in Judaism, and ultimately how that manifests on the ground, like from a legal perspective. Also, can they participate in the quorum? Are they reading from the Torah, etc., etc.? 1 second, I'm just gonna park the car for a second. And I saw a friend of mine who's on, let's say, the more progressive side, and she was walking in the evening with this book, which basically it's a training book for how to read the Torah in the traditional cadence, and which is usually done traditionally by men. And I saw her, and I was thinking about it for the last few weeks, and I called her this morning, and I told her that I'm going to talk about I'm letting you guys know I'm getting into like heavy Kabbalistic stuff. We don't have to double click on them right now. Just assume I'm not making stuff up. But I mentioned to her that there's a very big concern, and I was talking to some of the men in the community. There's a very big concern from this change. And I mentioned how many of the men here, which are very wise and very learned, nevertheless have not yet realized or tapped into the teachings and the realization that we have removed ourselves now from exile, from the very technical, logical, masculine manifestation of Judaism, and we are now in a transformation of the feminine return to the land. Also, how we look at the Shekhinah. If the halacha and the law is static, we are now moving towards something that's more fluid. Now, that is obviously very, very scary. That could be very, very wild, and this relates to like the wild Christianity. But part of this is that even if there is literature and about these topics, it hasn't been practiced for thousands of years. And to bring it to a community, it's very, very difficult for them even to conceptualize or we'll call prophesize or imagine how something like that would even look. And even for those, and I was mentioning to her, even for those who want change, first of all, I told her that seeing you walk at night to me is beautiful because I see it's this manifestation of this change, this wanting to really raise the crown on top of the head. This is referring to from Song of Songs, a verse over there, but realizing that we want to crown the imaginary and the spiritual or the feminine on top of the masculine and sort of have a fusion there. And you could map this onto also Genesis and the curses that befall onto man and woman after the fall and the rise of the three waves of feminism. But we need to realize that we are very nervous about these changes, and that doesn't mean we necessarily have to decide right away how this affects the legalese. Like, it doesn't mean that tomorrow this person's daughter is going to be the cantor. What it does mean, though, and what it does require, and this has to do with the fear or that we talk about in the TLC, is it's a conversation in motion, and we have to understand how these changes are happening. And it's very hard to notice when you're in the middle of that change, but but because of social media and because of the fact that we could be having this constant dialogue, we are aware of this change. And it almost makes us feel uncomfortable because what do you do? And obviously in Senate, PVK was dealing with this on the ground, like he's seeing these changes happen. And we have to realize how to, on one hand, be sensitive and realize that the things people are pushing for may indeed come to fruition and be ideal in the next 20, 30, 40 years. If we just resist, then it could transform into something horrible. However, if we realize how to listen carefully and potentially understand that this is a blessed change, then we could transform into something glorious. So in the TLC specifically, it has allowed for a space for these conversations to happen and for people to actually think about these things without the pressure of making a decision, right? Because no one, like if Paul's not your pastor and I don't owe him anything, so to speak, I don't necessarily have skin in the game yet. And this is the drawing board or the sandbox or where these things can happen. But ideally, Lance and Alan and David leave this table. And then when they go back to their community, they are better equipped to handle this tension. And I'm sorry for that long rant. That's it.
I think it's great.
Well, I'm sorry. You're right, Chezi. And one of the thousands of videos I haven't made is it was little indicated by the video where I talked about, the Catholic YouTubers doing more formation than any local Catholic priest. If you look at Trent or Pints with Aquinas, it's basically the Beth Moore blogging thing at another level, where Beth Moore as a woman, had way more influence than thousands of Southern Baptist ministers, even though in the Southern Baptist Convention, a woman can't, be clergy, but she has way more influence. And so, we're really, again, to me, Luke 5, there's this amazing passage about wineskins. And it's so amazingly ambiguous what Jesus does when he's wrestling with these things. And what you're pointing to is, again, the problem with wineskins. And I think, in the Christian Reformed Church, so the church arrived at a negotiated settlement of the local option for women in ministry. But now there's, again, a reassessment and says, okay, well, how does this work? Because just equal, same. Well, that's not quite right. So where exactly does this go? And I see the same thing happening when Annie Crawford holds a class on the symbolic world. Again, the symbolic world is, Jonathan Peugeot has way more influence than possibly any Orthodox clergy in America. And people might say, well, he's blessed by his priest. Well, wonderful. I'm glad he's blessed by his priest. I have no problem with what Jonathan Peugeot is doing. But in terms of how we conceptualize structures and institutions and organizations, these things aren't nothing. And I would say that, just looking at, let's say, the Virgin Mary, how much influence does Mary have? She might less than Peter, perhaps less than Paul, but maybe fourth. Jesus, Paul, Peter, or Jesus, Peter, Paul, and then Mary. Yeah, I know the group. So we're wrestling with embodiment. And so how is both the specific difference of male and female, masculine and feminine, embodied in the church? And I think Protestants, it's interesting that Catholics don't have women clergy, Orthodox don't have women clergy, Protestants have women clergy, but Protestants don't really have Mary. So I can't speak to the Jewish context, but we're all wrestling with these tensions that are here in creation.
Well, Paul, this is something you can delete this off your channel if you don't want. But one of the things, so anybody who's watched the dynamics in the United States over the decline of the church, right? And it really started to fall off the cliff. It started in the 70s, right, Paul? It started in the 70s, and we've seen this decline, and it's been accelerating. Now, this doesn't mean cause and effect, but about the time we start embracing more of these new liturgies, Jesus movement, into kind of all those sorts of things, but also when you can start to see women's ordination coming in. Now, was that part of it? I don't know, but you can't say it isn't either, right? Like to automatically say, well, because I think what Pajot's talking about, and when we think about this, is once we start breaking these hierarchies, and I think that's their hierarchies in these roles, right? And we see feminism come up in 70s. So now we start breaking these hierarchies. It's like Chesterton's fence. It's like, well, we don't like this fence. Let's tear it down, instead of really trying to think about it more broadly historically. And if you will hear this, you'll hear, I believe Father DeYoung said, I've heard lots of Orthodox priests say that the most powerful people, and I've been attending a Greek Orthodox church, the most powerful people are the yayas, the Greek faithful grandmothers. If there's a priest or whatever comes in and steps out of line, you know who the ones that are going to get him in line real quick? It's the faithful women that will do that. In addition, when we think about women in the home and mothers, my mom was mostly a stay-at-home mom, and my dad, had this stuff. I'm going to tell you who ran our house, Paul, who had more about our formation and everything else. It was my mom. Like, there's great power. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like, that role in terms of value and, quite frankly, power in formation. And so I know it's dangerous to talk about that, but I've been ruminating and thinking about in the United States. And, so I've been thinking about, were the boomers basically given a bad hand that modernity was going to ultimately come to its ultimate formation, and the church was going to collapse because of that? Were there things that we did and then we continued to do, changing structures and tearing down fences, that accelerated that? We don't know, but we also we have to put that on the table, right? And so, as Hezi brought in, and we thought about that, like, we have to just take a step back. And I know you mentioned on Synod where as soon as that decision was made, you could never talk about it again, right? Like, we've made this decision, can't talk about it. Like, so Minn Kota, is it Minn Kota that always comes together at the beginning of Synod and makes their objection or whatever? And I get that, but I think that's part of the larger conversations. There are third rails, I think, now, and regardless of what you want to say, since November, we're able to start having some of these conversations. I even think more societally now. I think there's been a bit of the cancel culture that's been some of the tyranny stuff that people are feeling free to step back to maybe look at a more common sense. So I think we have that moment. But I think within the church, like as Hezi talked about that, I think we need to step back and look at that. And I know that's a third rail you shouldn't be touching, particularly in certain Protestant circles. But but I don't know. I'm not saying that's the case, Paul. You know what I mean? But it's what's causation? What's correlation?
Well, go ahead, Alan.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry, Paul. Well, one thing I want to point out is if there's anything going on here, I would say the normative state for many people is that there are no barriers. There's no walls, no separation, no hierarchy. If you want to be a corporate person and go to your job, they'll call you whatever you want to call that. You want them to call you. Like, you can go home, you can smoke as much weed as you want, you can look at all the porn you want. Like, there are no barriers. Like, you could have polygamy, whatever you want. So the idea that, like, oh, well, the institutions are the problem. It's like, well, I think what we're seeing here is that people are running towards institutions. So immediately to be like, well, yes, they need to be updated and everything. But I think before, there's always this call for like reformation and change and updating. But it's like, well, when we look at the place that people seem to be moving away from towards the corner in this way station that we have here in the TLC, it seems like a lot of people are coming away from as much, weed and video games as you want. The weed and video game Golden Corral all you can eat buffet seems to have a problem. And so instead of just saying like, well, we're just going to rip down all the fences, like, maybe we should be careful because we kind of have that. If universal basic income, weed and video games, really is on the horizon. And I don't think that's the way forward. And I'm not saying everyone's directly saying that, but I'm saying that, you know, this whole like, well, it's all backwards and old and it's time for it to come down. Like I'm very hesitant about that, because it does seem to just slide back into, well, why do I follow anything? Why do I have to even show up to church? Why do I have to do anything? You know, anybody can do anything. I'm going to go to Livingstone's and I'll be the pastor on Sunday, you know? Sit down, PVK. I'm the pastor today. Like, and if you don't let me be the pastor, well, that's just because you're backwards and old school. It's like, okay, well, then we're just back to weed and video games land.
I think you're capturing something there, and it's a thread that seems like it's present throughout this whole conversation, whether it's metagelical or this other. I wish I knew the name of the playwright guy that was speaking earlier. Where the guy didn't want him to speak philosophy. There's this thing, this quote. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this lady named Nora Bateson, but she's got this quote. She says that part of the way she assesses her relationships is she says, "Who can I be when I'm with you?" And for people to introspect how they are influencing others in that regard. And I think this is a question it's part of the reason why this corner is so awesome. There's conversations we can have here. There's a way I can be that I'm longing to be in other places that just isn't allowed. And so I think churches freedom. Oh boy, can you guys see me? You guys all blinked out on me. Anyway,
you cut out for a minute, but
so the idea of freedom being those enabling constraints. So whether it's our formation, whatever that is, support, what is it that we're enabling each other to be in a positive, freeing, enabling way here that even can be translated into the fellowship? I don't know, but it's something that I'm longing to explore.
Can I just really quickly say something, Lance? I just glanced at the comments. I was heading out the door, and Phlebas is under the impression I was judging everyone in the corner, and I don't know what I said to make anybody think I'm judging. I'm sorry if I did that. My perspective is generally that we're all stuck in our various places, and God is at work trying to unstick us, and that it's a progressive process. Is that what I did? Was that offensive? Help me out, guys, real quick. If that was, I want to be a good player here, and I didn't mean to cause offense.
Phlebas is a big boy. You don't have to worry about hurting him. He's fine.
Well, I just want to make sure everybody else is cool too, because if everybody got that vibe, man, it's like I was like, wow, some demons that were messing with the signal.
The key, I think it's often lost that one of the key things about what we have going here is that we know each other. And in knowing each other, we have expectations of each other. And the more we get to know each other, the rougher we can play. And again, as Chezi keeps saying, this is not a safe space, it's a brave space. And the way we grow in courage is we get to know each other better. And so when I say something that offends someone, and I do all the time, or when I hit a nerve that is sort of sensitive, or when I step on a landmine, we talk about it. And that's why, of course, Lance, with you pushing back on women's ordination in church, I got to quick drop this from my channel because, boy, everything that's on Paul's channel is only according to what Paul thinks is within the box. That's why, we learned on Sunday with our council meeting that the Livingstone's most effective outreach strategy is the Freddie and Paul show. So, there you go, evangelicals. You want an outreach strategy, you just go ahead and try to replicate the Freddie and Paul show. So, Mark, if you're in church on Sunday, make sure you get there at 9 o'clock for estuary so the other Livingstoners can get to know you. But also stay, and we'll get you on the Freddie and Paul show. You just have to, if you really want to get on, you got to bring Freddie a gift. And bringing Freddie a gift will get you on the Freddie and Paul show. Trust me.
I'm going to be passing through in like 3 hours. 2.5, 3 hours. So I'm going to miss the Sunday and Freddie Paul show. It breaks my heart, but I will make another trip up if I get a chance to be on the Freddie Paul show, you bet I'll be on it. So.
All right.
We'll bring Freddie a gift. I will most definitely bring him
Christian
an
Reformed
offering.
evangelism right now. I'm waiting for other churches to try to copy it.
Well, what the draw on that, Paul, is that what you see are real people. Like that's why that's a draw. It's why my wife, and I'm sorry to say this, Paul, she prefers we watch the Freddie and Paul show together, and that's probably the only content she really likes in this side of the little corner. Because she does all the stuff we talk about. She doesn't need it, right? It's just like, what is that? Too many strands in my head. But she loved Fancy Nancy, and she just loved it. Was just real human beings having fun. And I always love, because I still watch most of your rough drafts the Sundays, and then used to tune in, but then I'm always amazed to see what Nancy got out of your sermons too, by the way. Which is part of the deal. Which, by the way, she got nuggets. I'm telling you, she found some nuggets that were there, but it was always fun to see that. So I think, and so what is the Freddie and Paul show? It's a lot like what we're doing here. What is it? Real human beings having real conversations, being them, hopefully trying to be themselves, right?
This topic, I had to speed listen through Paul's video and the beginning of this because I wanted to make sure nobody else already hit this stuff. But this is like the main thing that I've been studying for like most of my life, essentially. And I think the way to think that the conversionary experience thing is going away is a pretty blind. We have a blind spot there because we're all of the upper middle class, thinky talky, got our life together variety of people. Like, so most of my career in ministry was in Assemblies of God Church, and I was like the weird oddball there. Even when I went to ministry school, it was like I had my head screwed on too tight they didn't know what to do with me. Like, because there was always people who were coming in whose life was a mess, and so if you think about these poorer socioeconomic areas, that's where this gospel message still is moving in that way. And I think really we need to have this both and thing. The conversion experience is kind of the miraculous innovation of Christianity. But in those early years, what did people think they were converting to? They thought they were converting to like Judaism, which is the most cultural of religions. It's all about, you're born into it. But so so there was probably a big difference between the Jewish believers who have come and accepted Jesus as the Messiah, and then a guy like Cornelius, who as the pedo Baptists love to say, it was his household that was baptized. So, and there was infants in there, but he was going to have a lot of different questions about what do you do with these infants in the household now that we've all joined this religion. Like, he had to answer a totally different kind of thing. And so and what I noticed is like so like in a Pentecostal church, Assemblies of God, they will always say everything with the spiritual language. Everything that happens is the Spirit. But once you have your moment, if your life is a wreck, people are going to come and be helping you in very practical cultural ways. Here's how you balance a checkbook. Here's how you stop fighting with your wife all the time. Here's how you need to parent your kids and all that stuff. And it's almost like they're not recognizing it, that's what's happening. And it is deeply spiritual, but it's applied in this cultural context. Which, I think that's probably, we're ignorant to how often our churches are divided along those lines. And when you are in a church that has a diverse strata along those socioeconomic lines, that's a really rare and amazing thing. where you can have people worshiping together in that way. And it's different from just money, because if Pentecostal people get rich, they just turn into prosperity gospel people. They don't learn how to, they haven't figured out the culture of like wisdom with that stuff. So anyway, it's good to have to be metagelical, because we need both of these. And maybe it's just churches and pastors need to be a little bit more open about saying, we've noticed that you're not doing well, young teenager. Perhaps you should go down to this Anglican church down the street or something and learn something new, So I don't know.
What does metagelical mean?
Paul?
Evangelicals broke down the walls between Protestant churches and innovated a new way to do mission and community. Those walls are now breaking down between the Protestants and the Catholics and the Orthodox, that the Orthodox and the Catholics are being, at least in America, becoming more like evangelicals, and the Protestants and evangelicals are becoming more like Orthodox and Catholics. And the body of Christ is breaking down the walls and learning from each other and growing together. Andrew, where's your bowl of cereal?
I just woke up, and plus, like, there's no good cereal here. It's all like wheat thins. What am I supposed to do with that? Like,
we need to start a GoFundMe, Captain Crunch for Andrew T. Or what's your favorite cereal, Andrew?
Honey Nut Cheerios.
Yeah. Honey Nut Cheerios for Andrew T. Okay. So please send. Put your address in there, and we'll have to DoorDash you some Honey Nut Cheerios. That's right.
All right. Well, I've got to jump off for a meeting here in about 10 minutes. So if people want to, unless Kyle, if you want to continue to jump in here to keep this going, I know you have the ability to do that. Otherwise, if people want to have their final words, and so I'll have mine right now, and then I'll be quiet and let people do this. Sam said something. It struck a chord with you, Paul. It struck a chord with me. It struck a chord with Andrew. You did a homeroom today on that. We're not saying that the conversion moment, that stuff doesn't happen, or low church isn't going to exist, or those things aren't real. Actually, if you talk to a lot of people, there was a lot that led up to that moment. Like, there's years or whatever we're going to say that. However, there does appear to be people recognizing, people who are doing church, that something's changing. And as the emergent church saw that, they're moving towards realizing people are looking for something. It would appear as if you're doing church and you're not realizing the people that are going to show up on your doorstep are looking for something more solid. I don't know what the right word, I'm searching for them, Paul, whatever, something like that. It's happening. Like, if you can talk to Lutherans and Orthodox, and we're seeing it here or whatever, something's happening. And so I do think I do think that what we're doing is we're observing it and trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I'll end my stream at the top of the hour too. I got to open up the church for the Bible study ladies, and but yeah, something is happening, and I guess what I wanted to do in homeroom was flesh out a little bit more about Sam's observation. But all of these observations, as Michael just made, all of these are in context, and Michael's right. It's sort of well-educated. Even if you look at the corner, we're dominated by, not exclusively, we're dominated by well-educated, doing okay. We've got some people who, have sort of Chad and his 12 steppers, have given us some credibility down in the lower ranks, but we're, again, part of the whole emergent movement observation. That my aha moment a couple of weeks ago was, we have sort of picked up where the emergent movement left off. And I thought CW's observations about, well, did the emergent movement really go away or fail? Because, those to the left sort of bolstered the main line. I'm sure the main line was super happy to have them. The Calvinists sort of reinvigorated a bunch of historically sort of wobbling Calvinist denominations like the Christian Reformed Church, and a whole bunch that's sort of deconstructed. Now they've gone into strengthening the Orthodox and the traditional Catholics. So, it sort of went to seed, but those seeds have sprouted, and those sproutings have strengthened the various different elements of the North American church. And I think part of what the corner is doing is very much in continuity with that. But, Cale, I should make a video. Cale asked a great question in one of the videos. He said, Paul, why didn't you deconstruct like a lot of the emergents? Because I was very much going in an emergent trajectory. And then basically I took a turn much more towards Tim Keller. So I took a turn towards Young, Restless, and Reformed. Now, many will look at me and say I'm not purely Young, Restless, and Reformed because of a variety of my views. But, but I didn't go mainline. I didn't go Young, Restless, and Reformed. I haven't gone Orthodox. I've stayed Christian Reformed. But I think that's sort of part of CW's point in that video, which was the emergent movement wasn't fruitless. So
I wonder if that whole thing is almost like some of a result of, the older generation of boomers going into these places, planting these churches, and essentially they had the success and it transformed the culture, because then all these pastors' kids are growing up in the suburbs and they're hearing their parents preach this gospel that's really aimed at wicked people that don't have their life together. And that's some of the disconnect even that I experienced, not so much in my parents' church, but in the church that I attended a lot as a teenager, was like, where's the wickedness and the evil? Oh, it's like, and then you just start looking at it, you're projecting it onto yourself, and that's where you get all that guilt that is not really appropriate, and it was a lot of just artsy suburban yuppies.
Well, so what happened with Methodism over the long run was it sort of initiated some purity spirals in some people. And a big part of what the emerging church movement was addressing some of those purity spirals. Even Nadia Bolz-Weber and her little vagina cast out of the purity rings. Talk about an embodiment of dealing with purity spirals. And the truth is that a lot of older denominations, like the Orthodox, when I listen to Orthodox priests talk shop in terms of pastoral care, you can hear that orthodoxy, a lot of Orthodox priests have a lot of inherited wisdom whereby they recognize a purity spiral when they see one. My conversation with John Heers about, he got married at the wrong time of year, and then he was really looking forward to having a great sex life with his wife, and they went into a fasting, season in the Orthodox church, and he's like, what am I going to do? And the priest is like, you're looking for a dispensation to relieve you of fasting, not having, glorious lovemaking with your wife. No, I'm not going to give you that dispensation, but if you're going to have sex with your wife, have sex with your wife. But even there is, pulling back from a purity spiral, but others who are super into Orthodox rigor are going to say, how dare the priest say that to him? So and so I'm preaching on the Sermon on the Plain now this week, which is one of the more rigorous statements of Jesus, but it establishes an ideal that just keeps pulling us. And there's, and what happens in the church is that the whole body of church embodies all of those tensions. And you have to somehow navigate between your purity spirals and your complete nominalism. And the church is able to do that and has been for centuries.
This is so cool, and it's why I appreciate you, Paul, so much. I remember when we did our little one-on-one talk way back in the day, I was just thanking you so much for sort of implicitly giving me permission to have the thoughts that I was thinking. And I think the estuary is a similar place where a friend of mine once told me, you don't understand the sort of the principle of something until you kind of go off the edge. And so we identify, we find the boundaries of what defines a faith, or perhaps even where the limits of our own understanding are, when we are outside it, or so near the edge that we're like, oh, there's the edge. And I respect and honor that there are places where that's not the purpose. The purpose is to focus on the core of what is it? How do you define the container that's defined by what it's containing versus what the boundaries of it are? Anyway, that I really love this environment because it allows security within this implicit we're together in this, whatever this is. Um, Loosely around Christianity or some kind of love one another ethic that also allows us to respect each other's container. Um, and I don't know what that says about the church, but I think that it's kind of in a most denominations or sects or bodies have kind of shot themselves in the foot by implying that if you even suggest that you are curious about where the edges be, you're a threat.
Yeah, that's true. and I think, and this is where, this is where faith comes in. And I know it through my Calvinism, because and again, I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to make other traditions feel less than, but for me, in my Calvinism, what isn't so important is my grip on God, but what's really important is God's grip on me. And at least my tradition really emphasizes that, finally, it's not my ability to hang on, it's God's ability to hang on. And I have more confidence in his grip strength than in mine. So, and I'm not saying other traditions don't say that, but for me, that, and if that then gives you a confidence to say, okay, that God might bring me to extremities. Look at what he does to his prophets. Look at what he does to his apostles. Look at what he does. God's favorite tools, just like with any workshop, if you have something really hard you need to do, you grab your favorite tool and you push that tool to its limit. And that's what God does. And so I think cowardice is a real problem in a church in an affluent world. And that's why we see monastic movements break out. That's why St. Anthony goes to the desert. That's why the call of the Sermon on the Plain is wrenching someone like Paul Kingsnorth when he gives his Erasmus lecture. And it's a cry in the desert. How should I live? I want to be pure. And, the Gadarene demoniac, is liberated by Jesus. And all he says is, I want to be with you, Jesus. And Jesus says, go back to your family. And it's like, and tell them what God has done for you. And it's like, for him, that is the most enormous self-denial possible, when all I want to do is be with this man who rescued me. And Jesus says, no, you go be with your family and tell them what God has done and live your life. Have a wife, have children, have a job, live the life I've given you. That's so radical.
I think about that in the conversion experience necessary to take somebody who's really deep into homelessness or some kind of agoraphobia. There's something about going to a completely different way that is more appealing than just taking on the burden of regular workaday life.
It is to be a normie to be a Christian, Normie, is often very difficult. There are, and you'll find the saints and the monks say this too, you know, and to be a monk in the desert without a family, without a job, yeah, there are certain challenges to that. But to be a Christian with a family and a job and to have to vote and to, you know, it's really hard. You can't afford a purity spiral. You're going to have compromises. You're going to hear Jesus call to the wilderness, and it's going to test your soul. So, you know, the path is narrow.
And to echo that, Paul, I think we all have our, Father DeYoung had a conversation with Pajot, and he's coming out with Paul the Pharisee, which is going to be really interesting. He's talking about that context. And the fact of the matter is we all have these specific calls. And one of the things, I can't remember which saint, I'll try and figure that up and share it. But basically he talked about a faithful woman taking care of her family is worth 1,000 prayers in a monastery. Okay? Because that's hard, right? And so what you just talked about, which is, you know, some people are called to be monk, but you obviously aren't. So you're here. And by the way, your struggle is seen by God as worthy and valuable. And that's hard. And so go live your life lovingly, day to day, moment to moment, with a God consciousness or whatever. And whatever you do it under the Lord. I mean, it's that's that thing that I think crosses, that's very metagenical, but like when you say that's Calvinism, I would say that's mere Christianity, right? And so you see those things. So I think that's a good call to all of us we talk about these things, but go be a good son, daughter, husband, parent, worker, whatever you need to do today. And we'll continue this conversation. I've got to jump on to a meeting here. So anyway, thanks Sam first, and then Alex, and then your homeroom. And I'm just interested in this stuff. I'm a church nerd. I followed this. I like seeing how that played out in society. And so I appreciate everyone for coming in and joining in this conversation.
All right. Thank you all. Take care.
Go ahead, Michael. We got 1 minute.
Okay. I could use all of your prayers because we just found out baby number 4 is coming. And I need to sell some books, so
may it be a male child. You've got 3 girls, right?
Yeah. Whatever. I mean, that's going to be more of a learning curve, but we'll see. It's whatever God's will is.
All right. Wonderful, Michael. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.